to me, the energy when you're in a kitchen that's like really humming and everyone gets along and you're super busy and like all these things, there's nothing like that. And to me, that was always the thing that drew me.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Empire, where we like to engage with everyone from pastors to actors, rappers to trappers, and everybody in between. My name's Antonio Lee Miles. I am your host, and we got another amazing, great guest for today, as y'all should know. Hey, you guys should know the deal. Or if you don't, please like the video, subscribe, comment down below what you guys think, and all that good jazz. If you want to support us, you can just like the video, but if you want to help us with them greenbacks and them digital dollars that help put some money to do some stuff, you can do our CashApp, which is $TheeEmpirePodcast, or our PayPal, which is paypal.me/TheeEmpirePodcast, something like that. It'll be in the description, both of them. But other than that, we're going to get into our guest today, who is a chef. We've got our first chef on board, so this should be fun. And we're going to get right into this gentleman, and his name is Jacque. And how you say your last name again?
Pinto-Brickhouse.
Pinto-Brickhouse. Welcome to The Empire, Jacque.
Thanks for having me.
Man, so how's your day been, bro?
It's been mellow. Today's chill, super mellow, not too much that I had to do today, so this is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have to go in today later and...
No, thankfully.
Okay.
No, we're at the point now where I'm like strictly during the daytime. I don't have to go in for dinner service. So.
Oh, wow. So you're kind of living that good life.
No, I'm living, it's great right now.
Okay. It's super great. Okay. With a capital G.
Yeah. Big G on that.
Got you.
Yeah.
I love that. You know, so I have to ask this question, right? And so I noticed that a lot of chefs, do you know what I'm going to ask?
No,
maybe,
but we'll find out.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
We're going to jump into the water.
Yeah.
So a lot of chefs have sleeves. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
He's not wearing sleeves, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
We're talking about tattoo sleeves.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
Honestly, it's kind of random. I don't have like full sleeves. I just have like, I don't know. I go through phases where I like really want like something done, and then I've traveled a bit, so it's like generally any new city I've ever lived in, I always try to get something done, or try to load up on it as much as I can.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's a weird like collective like chef thing. There's like tons of chefs that I know who like also all have tattoos, but also there's some that I know who don't.
Like tattoo lists.
Yeah, no.
Wow.
Some of them like they're kind of, I mean, it's also just one of those like weird careers where like when you start to get up there, like you can get a lot of money, but also like when you start out, like you're not making much.
Gotcha.
So if you are getting tattooed, it's like by friends and like other weird stuff like that, which I do have a handful of those. So,
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. I got two questions here. So, so what would you say is like, because you say when you get up there, you can kind of make a good amount of money.
Yeah.
Right? But when you start off, it's kind of low. Can you give us the range from like low to high?
Yeah, I don't know. It's changed so much since when I first started. When I first started, I was living in St. Louis and I was making, I think it was like $11. And which is now feels absurd.
What year? What would you?
That was, 2017.
Okay. Wow, not that long ago, technically.
Yeah, no. Yeah, wow. Yeah, 2000, late end 2016, 2017, for sure. Yeah, that was like $11. And like where I'm from in Philly, like the minimum wage is still $7.50. So it's
today?
Not, yeah.
Wow.
So it's not unheard of for cooks to get paid like $10, and then everyone thinks they're like actually doing really well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was like you started off just like peeling onion, peeling and dicing onions, like peeling potatoes and doing all these things. And yeah, now it's at the point where like, yeah, you can make a comfortable, like, six figures if you want, depending on if you're also, I don't know, it's also a weird generation thing now too, because like now comparatively, like to when I started, you had to like work for tons of chefs or acclaimed places and develop a skill set. And maybe you went to culinary school or maybe you didn't, but you worked really hard and like you had to kind of move up the ranks within the confines of a restaurant. But now it's kind of open season and you can kind of do whatever you want. You can either cook for a restaurant and like do good there and then just kind of do your own thing. And like, if people are willing to pay money for your food, then like you can kind of just do whatever you want. But there's a lot of people who are also like very brandable and like all those kind of things. So yeah, people can make as much money as you want to if you brand yourself well, if you like are consistently like doing pop-ups, doing recipes, doing all these. There's a lot of different avenues within food to be a chef. And a traditional chef now is like so different than what it was like 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, even 50 years ago.
Even 50 years ago, truly.
Gotcha. Like you could even do like a YouTube channel on just
No,
cooking.
you could literally do that. And I have friends who like, that's all they do. They just do like recipes and like they do YouTube or TikTok and like they get like paid sponsor ads and like all these things. And I'm like, that's just not my style, but like that's
Gotcha.
good for you that you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy how, like how different it is. And I guess what's cool is that the internet kind of gave more freedom, I guess, to the chef. Right? I
Yeah.
guess to everybody, technically, to all creators.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to go back to the tattoo thing, right?
Yeah.
So do you think like it's like an underground like thing between chefs, like subconsciously or consciously? What do you think? Because like probably like, would you say like 75% of chefs have slaves?
I would say I don't even know. Maybe I go like 60.
Okay.
60.
But it's definitely a huge percentage,
It's
right?
it's a big percentage for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just always I was like, no, I was like, you're okay, chef, slaves. I'm like, what's going on here? Like,
no, I mean, I think it's like I don't know. I also like to think that like maybe there's a weird parallel between like cooking and like the amount of like pain and anguish you have to do to get through a shift.
Hilarious.
And then it's like a weird parallel to like you just getting tattooed and it's kind of the same thing. You're still picking to do it.
Gotcha.
So maybe there's a weird parallel there.
Gotcha.
But
So you're calling chefs masochists?
I'm not saying all chefs are masochists, but I'm saying that
60%.
I'll go 40. A handful of chefs are definitely masochists for sure.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Jacque, can you please tell us all, for who may not know, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Jacque, 31. I'm the chef de cuisine over at the Overland, or at least for the next 5-ish weeks. Yeah, I'm a transplant. I moved here from Philadelphia. My wife grew up down in Riverside. She's from the Bay Area over in Salinas, and then grew up partly down here. And when we got married, she convinced me to relocate. And yeah, so we've been in Riverside for like 2 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. When did you relocate from Philly to over here?
Yeah. It was
2 years
like-
ago?
Yeah. It was like 2021.
So you met your wife in Philly?
No, that's the so the long and short version is we are absolutely pandemic like couple.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you made it.
Yeah, we made it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we met online on Hinge, the dating app. When I had lived briefly in Brooklyn after leaving, and like leaving the Midwest. And basically, she had set her location to Brooklyn, New York, but she wasn't actually living in Brooklyn.
Okay, she tricked you.
Oh no, she hoodwinked me. It was
Got
fucking
you.
crazy.
I think they call it
Yeah.
gaslighting or
Yeah,
something.
something like that. But yeah, she set her location to a different spot, and yeah, we did long distance,
Okay,
and yeah, through all that, then we got married, eloped over in San Bernardino courthouse,
nice.
and yeah, been here ever since.
Boom.
Yeah,
And you mentioned that you're at the Overlands for a short period of time, and then you have future plans,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Do you mind sharing with us your future plans?
Yeah, I'm still debating on what place I'm gonna go to, but there are offers in Seattle, Washington.
Okay.
So gonna be moving up to Seattle, which I'm excited for.
Yeah.
I spent like about a year and a half, 2 years in the Pacific Northwest when I was in college,
Okay.
and so to me, it's kind of like, I mean, I was living in Portland, but like Seattle is basically in my head, it's just adult Portland.
Okay. Interesting.
It's
Where people have
like
to wear pants or something?
like not being like weird for the sake of just being fucking weird. It's just
Oh,
like it feels more like an adult version of it for some
gotcha.
reason.
Can you give us like a little visual example for people who don't know, like the
Man,
difference between the adult and the non-adult?
it's like I don't know. Portland is like it's fun and it's beautiful. Don't get me wrong, it's beautiful. There's so many great restaurants out there right now, but when I was there in like 2012, 2014,
Hmm.
like it was you could go days without seeing any other person of color. It was like Portlandia, but like the worst version of it.
Okay.
And Seattle just feels like if those people like got serious like big people jobs and then they just moved up to Seattle where they
Okay.
have to pay more rent and they can't just like do it yourself kind of energy.
Got you. They have to have mortgages.
Yeah, like it's definitely just a little bit more buttoned up. But also like everyone that I've met out there is also like transplants. So
Interesting. Can you give us like, Jacques, can you give us like as brief as you can or as detailed as you'd like, how you grew up, where you grew up, and your journey to where you are today?
sure. Yeah, so I grew up in Northwest Philly. The neighborhood is called Strawberry Mansion. It's
Okay.
basically the north side of Philly at one point was on the at least on the northwest side was pretty industrial. It's where all of the breweries were, all of like kind of just like canning industries. There are a bunch of different breweries there at the time. Just super industrial. And then the northeast side of Philly was more so like immigrant, but like Polish kind of immigrants. There was like a bunch of butchers, bakeries, stuff like that. But it's not like that anymore. Strawberry Mansion's pretty, it would more or less be the hood over
Gotcha.
there. The demographic is definitely one where Philly just inherently by nature is like a very black city.
Yeah. City of brotherly love, right?
Yeah, it's like I think the last time I looked at it, it was like I think the technical like black population there was like 40 something percent, which is wild comparatively to other major cities. It's still wildly affordable, which is great. But yeah, grew up there. All of my family's from there and around like the tri-state area, so like New York, Jersey. I spent a lot of time going back and forth between like my mom's and my grandma's. So my grandparents lived up in like Central Jersey. My mom sent me to school out there because all the schools or public schools were just like not good. So she sent me to school up there in Jersey, and I would basically just be back and forth between Philly and Jersey. And then from there, like when I first kind of started to like, I don't know, like I always did sports growing up, always played like basketball, football, baseball, and then it wasn't until like high school where like I was not clearly hitting a growth spurt. I was not like when I finally did hit my growth spurt, like injuries kept happening, so I kind of had to figure out like who I was outside of like
Sports.
sports and then just like the area. So it was like
The Philly area.
yeah, Philly and then Jersey and like my friends were all like sports kids and stuff like that. So I kind of oddly enough found myself in a lot of art classes and that's kind of where I felt like I was starting to kind of like figure out who I was outside of like this group of friends, outside of sports, outside of just like the people that I knew in my neighborhood growing up, all these things. And then I went to like a community college the first year. I was like a painting major, and then my teacher squashed all of that pretty
Okay.
quickly.
What did they say?
They told me that I painted like a sculptor.
What does that even mean?
I don't know what that means, but she was pretty like told me that multiple times. And maybe like at the time I didn't like painting with brushes. I liked painting on tops of things with like texture. So to me it
Uh-huh.
was like painting on a full canvas without texture felt weird and I didn't know how to create texture without using different things to paint on
Okay.
and then applying texture. So then
What a hater.
I know she was super rude. But it actually worked to my benefit. I ended up going to San Fran for a bit. I studied industrial design there. That program got canceled due to like just the lack of students.
To be like an industrial engineer?
Yeah, or not
Wow.
an industrial engineer, but like I was studying industrial design there to basic. You can the field generally is like super vague, where it's like you could do sneakers or you could do like casino like slot machines,
Okay.
stuff like that. The
Wow.
like it was the range of it was like super crazy of like them teaching you general design principles and practices, but then to me like it kind of like towards the end of my time there, I kind of got more like I felt gravitated more towards like furniture.
Oh, interesting.
Just because to me it was I don't know, I always thought it was interesting why people chose like how they chose their own furniture or like what made them gravitate towards like this or this comparatively to this chair or like this table or
Yeah.
whatever it is. So I ended up leaving school. I ended up doing like an apprenticeship for about a year. I went back home.
Apprenticeship in what?
So it was so it was an apprenticeship in woodworking
Oh, cool.
through like a Japanese woodworker and sculptor
Wow.
that my teacher knew. So I ended up doing that for about a year. And that was super eye opening. Just as a kid from like the city who like never thought about trees as anything more than just trees.
Yeah, if there was
And
any.
yeah, if there were any. And when I did, like I wasn't thinking about that or like thinking about their lifespan, like not putting your design on the tree, but letting that tree dictate what you need it for
Cool.
and all these different things. So for me, that was super eye opening as a kid who just never had access to that stuff, didn't understand that. So the first like 3 months of it were kind of wild, and towards the end, it was like a completely like switch and like giant transformation. So then after that, I kind of just was like checking out different schools in different areas to see where I felt most comfortable. I ended up settling back in Portland, Oregon, but I was mostly doing furniture from like like a sculpture kind of standpoint, and trying to make furniture out of things that you weren't supposed to traditionally make furniture out of.
Wow.
So a lot of it was like doing I one of my senior projects was like I made a table and chairs out of it was wire like peanut butter and like all these things, like bird seeds, peanuts, all these
Oh
things.
wow.
Um,
Ooh,
Basically, in the
roaches.
attempt, I had this like weird like thought, and I had the teachers there at the school were one like super open to anything I wanted to do, which was probably good and bad. Because I would just like have random dreams and be like, yeah, can we like do this? And they're like, fuck it, like let's
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. Awesome.
So yeah, I did like my senior project and was like a table and chairs out of like wire and like peanut butter and all this crazy stuff because I had this like weird dream about like all these birds and like squirrels and all these things like on this table or sitting at the table like eating, and it would just look like there was like a full table set with like all these animals.
It's like a Snow White.
Yeah, like something like that.
Yeah.
And it did not happen. It actually turned into like this weird like fucking abstract piece where like we put it in the middle of a park in Portland and we kept moving it to different parks within Portland, and we would hide like in the bushes or like a block away and just film it, and it turned into like everyone else's like weird, like people would walk up to it, have different reactions to it, people would like touch it. There had all of these different interactions that I didn't think would happen, but ended up happening, which was cool. Dogs loved it. Dogs would come up to it, lick it, the whole nine. When we put it in downtown, like I think after like 30 minutes, a houseless person walked up and just took the whole table with them.
Awesome.
And I was like, honestly, that's valid. Like, very valid, very fair. You can definitely take that. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I think between there and then I came back home, um, I basically was doing fabrication for smaller furniture companies
Okay.
in Philly. And then I basically met this guy, Jay, who was basically running a small, like, furniture store on, like, Antique Row in Philly. We ended up partnering together to do, like, basically a mid-century furniture shop. And
Wow.
we had a studio in the basement. So it was, like, during the week, he would go to, like, an estate sale, pick up a bunch of pieces. I'd work on them during the week, and then I would also work the showroom on the weekends and just like try to sell people furniture.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was so much fun.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Only because like for that shop, like and the price point and stuff like that, a lot of it were just people who like either were collectors or it was kind of like maybe it was like a couple's like first big furniture purchase where it wasn't like a futon that got passed around from like a frat house or something like
Yeah.
that. It
Yeah.
was like their first big piece of furniture that they like would chip in together on. So
Gotcha.
it was super fun to kind of just like have those interactions with people, really build community within like that neighborhood. And then when that closed down, I had a bunch of friends who were working in coffee, so I kind of switched and started working in coffee. Um, and yeah, I
Did you
met
just get tired of furniture and woodwork and stuff? Is that was kind of, you were like, I need something new? What was?
needing something new, but I guess I also towards the end there was getting kind of pessimistic about like that also too was kind of the makers boom where it felt like there were so many new furniture companies coming out. There were so many like people were getting into ceramics again. People were just getting into making things with their hands again in
Gotcha.
a way where like that wasn't a thing for the last like 15, 20 years prior. So it was like everything was like if you can get this made by somebody else and you don't have to do it, then dope. But there was like a big makers boom, which was great, but at the same time, like I think I was getting a little pessimistic about the idea that like regardless of like how much work I put into something, if my family can't afford it, then like that says everything about what this industry is at the moment. Is that like there's no Like if I make something and it's $600, like is that something realistically that like people where I come from, can they actually afford that?
Okay.
And to me, that was more so just like kind of the start of transitioning to trying to figure out something that like to me still I still wanted to work with my hands. I still wanted to um make something that to me felt accessible. And furniture just at that time wasn't the thing.
Yeah.
I chose furniture mostly because like coming out of school and only doing sculptures, like so many of my friends who are like painters or like sculptors traditionally doing more abstract things, like they do art shows and then like people may or may not buy a piece.
Mm-hmm.
And to me it was like, well, if I can make something functional that someone needs, then I'm like, that means I'm making money.
True.
And to me, it was like, especially coming from where I come from, like that was always my biggest thing was like my mom always pushing me to be like, well, like what's going to make you money? Like what's going to,
Yeah.
at the end
Yeah.
of the day, like
Yeah.
as much as I want to be like, well, like, you know, I want to create things and like do all this. I'm like, at the end of the day, you still need money
Yeah.
and you still need to like buy stuff. You still
Yeah.
need to like, buy wood. You still need to do all these things. And I'm like, you have to have money for it. So to me, it was like, well, like now it kind of, especially like having friends who are like painters and stuff like that, where like a lot of them have transitioned to like illustration and like a bunch of other things
Yeah.
that like, or they've done traditional graphic design now
Yep. Yep.
because it's like, those are consistent things that will make you money.
Yeah.
As much as they love painting like giant canvases and stuff like that, I'm like, at this point, it's like so rare to like meet someone who like paints and then they only paint. They don't dabble in anything else. They don't do anything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just like, and at the time I was also like possibly thinking of like maybe I'll go and get like my master's. Like I don't really know.
Okay. So you went to the coffee spot.
Yeah, I went to coffee, and through that, like, I ended up meeting a girl during that time. She was from the Midwest and got me to relocate to St. Louis.
Okay.
And in St. Louis, I basically worked for a coffee spot for a long time, Catalyst Coffee Bar. Basically, it is half coffee bar and half a part of a like art nonprofit.
Okay.
So basically, it was the manager there doing all the coffee stuff for them for like a year and a half, almost 2 years. And then I had so many friends by that point in St. Louis who were cooking, people who I knew from like the bars that we were going to, all these things. And I was like, I kind of want out. Like, I don't really know what my next move is. Like, I'm still thinking about grad school. I'm still thinking about all these things, but I just want to make more money than I want to right now.
Yeah, than what you are making or what you were making.
Yeah. So, and I'm like, I don't like waking up early. Like, I just want to like, I mostly just want to like kick it. And they like got me to come through to like a few different kitchens. I like stage, which is basically just doing like a trial run.
Okay. Like you just come in and just.
Yeah, I remember I came in, it was like one of my friends was working as like a cook there. I brought like, I didn't have like a knife or like a nice knife. I had like an IKEA knife set. So I like brought my knife and I ended up just loving it. It was like super fast paced. Like it was like a little chaotic, which people either like are really drawn to or they're not. And
The
that's also
masochism
okay.
and
Yeah. And I'm like, and that's also okay. Yeah, I ended up just like really falling in love with it. And then I worked at a bunch of places out there that really I think a big part of where I'm at now is because I worked with people who actually really cared.
Gotcha. It matters. It matters.
Yeah, and that mattered a lot in just my own growth, but also because I didn't go to culinary school, I definitely was. You play catch up. You're playing catch up the whole time. So I remember when I first started, and a lot of it for me was just like I would bring bags of like onions home to work on my knife cuts. I would like anything that we had on the menu, if I could grab those ingredients to try to do it at home to speed up like my understanding of like why this needs to be done a certain way, or if it were simple things like butchering and like breaking down chickens and things like that, like
Gotcha.
breaking down fish, whatever I could do to help speed up the process, I was doing. Um, and then I don't, for the most part, like I said, I got to work for a lot of really good people, a lot of really good people who cared. And then on top of that was just kind of being at the right place at the right time, with just in general, like who who I got to work for and with, but also, yeah, honestly, it was just the right place, right timing, and just making decisions about who I wanted to work for. And I think it also started to change when I realized that like I wanted to start to learn more about myself culturally, and then I wanted to learn how to cook that food.
Gotcha. Black American food?
Um, so I'm mixed mostly from like primarily like my grandparents who are here like in both in Philly, and my grandparents they retired and moved out to India.
Okay. Oh, wow. In California?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's like a
interesting.
yeah, it's kind of it was super random at the time when they first retired, and I was like that's
Okay.
kind of random, like you guys can't like I don't know.
So they went from New Jersey to India?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
kind of weird. It was like you guys couldn't just like, and like for us, like coming from Philly, like when people go and retire, they like
Yeah.
go to like the suburbs of Philly.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you guys can't just go to like the burbs in Philly, and
Yeah. It would have
like,
been cheaper.
I'm like, it would have been vastly cheaper. They argue, and they're just like, well, you know, we want to play golf and ball, and I'm like, that's fine.
Okay. Well,
I'm like,
do you? It's
whatever.
your money.
Yeah, it's your money. Like, do whatever you want. But I'm like, could have saved yourself a lot of money.
That part.
Um, but yeah, it was like when I don't know, I for them like so I because I'm mixed, I grew up primarily in like an African American home.
Gotcha. When you say mix, can you elaborate for people who may not know what you
Yeah.
mean?
So Puerto Rican, Cuban, Portuguese, French, from Spain, also like the Canary Islands in the UK,
Okay.
and mostly different countries in Africa, mostly Nigeria,
Okay.
and a little bit like South American.
Okay. And this is
So
split between mom and dad.
yeah, mom and dad, and also Jewish is in there somehow.
Okay.
So yeah, it was like I mostly grew up a certain way. I didn't grow up knowing my dad, so I mostly knew my like his family, not him specifically. So it was like because he wasn't around, it was like I knew my grandma Irma, who was like indigenous Puerto Rican,
Okay.
and it was like I even to this day like I can still remember the smell of like her cooking beans, her cooking all these different things like squid and all these other things that like, and even just having that like there's like a giant jar of like sofrito base like
Okay.
in the house and things like that.
What is sofrito base?
So sofrito is like tomato, all of your aromatics like garlic, onion. Sometimes she would cook it down with strawberries
Okay.
and other random things, but mostly aromatics that she would cook down, and it would like blend, and it was just like a thing that she would throw into rice, throw into
Okay.
beans, throw into like it's kind of just like a random base of things that are just delicious, and she would just like
Gotcha.
throw it in there.
Here's some
And
basically sauce.
basically,
Yeah. Okay.
it's like a not
A
even like
dip
a
or something.
oh, not even a sauce, but just like a random paste
Okay.
that she would
Okay.
make, and she would just like throw it in there, and I'm like, and it's delicious now.
Yeah.
So it's just like random things like that. I just kind of quickly noticed that like Um, especially like in cooking, for the most part, like in America, you're only cooking like a handful of different cuisines.
Mhm. I was going to get into
And
that.
yeah, it's like you're really only cooking French, or you're cooking Italian,
Yep.
like maybe you're cooking like some Spanish, but maybe it's either like from Spain, or it's like maybe, I mean, in regarding like here in the IE, like you're cooking mostly
Mexican.
Mexican.
Hmm.
So they're like, you're not really, or like sometimes maybe like if you're working somewhere that has like a lot of diversity, maybe you're cooking Japanese, maybe you're cooking like a few other things, but generally like you're not cooking all that much. It's gonna be new American, quote unquote, whatever the fuck that means.
Yeah.
No one knows what that means. It just means that like whoever the chef is or whatever it is, like they draw inspiration from a lot of different things,
Yeah.
which to me is like technically, if we're gonna be honest, like
Yeah, let's be honest.
yeah, like technically, like what is like America's food is black food. Like
Uh-oh.
I'm just
You wanna elaborate for people? Elaborate for us.
I mean, when we talk about like quintessential American food that was brought over, like there were the Native Americans who were here first,
Okay.
clearly. But when you talk about like food that was brought over from like England and all these things, like yeah, they have that over there. But I'm like, really the transatlantic slave trade, like they brought over an entirely new cuisine that wasn't here before. They were talking about rice production. You're talking about all these things like mac and cheese that were things that were like technically like yeah, it was invented in France and like all these things, but it's like they're this is stuff that we made like American.
Hmm.
Quintessential American classics are things that were derived from like different cultures, and we've somehow like just fucking ignore that, and
Got you.
we like claim it's American and like do our thing to it. But I'm also like,
Got you.
that's a little like we can like I think the biggest thing, especially when people are like, oh yeah, like we cook new American, I'm like, but what does that mean?
Got you. It's kind of like they whitewashed the history of
Yeah,
what the origin of mac and cheese is, or
yeah,
like when you say rice, people don't think it came from Africa.
no,
You know.
but I'm like, that's primarily like if we're talking honestly, like we're talking about like that entire like slavery, as terrible as it was, it brought an entirely different look of food and how we approach agriculture. Like
Hmm.
that's our first acumen as people from Africa, is based off of that agriculture, and we brought an entirely new thing with us.
Hmm.
Seeds, all those things. Like we changed a lot of it. We changed a lot of the landscape.
Hmm.
And then like you want to cook new American, but like if it's not Southern food, which we all know is like also like a deviation off of that,
Hmm.
and like Creole or any of these other things, like
Yeah.
they're all really derived from one source. But it's
Mm.
like to, or at least in my head, I'm like, that's kind of what it feels like. But I'm like, generally, when you're cooking, like you're cooking, when people are like, oh yeah, like we cook like French food, I'm like, okay, so you're not getting ingredients from France. You're
Uh-oh.
not getting like all these things. So like what does that actually mean? Like how much of French food are you actually cooking? Because how much of it is actually coming from there? And or how much of it is local stuff? How much of it is this and that?
Yeah. Good
So
argument.
yeah, so to me it's just like I don't know, when I realized that like with cooking, at least for my end, it was like, well, you know, you kind of have to break your back at places to get ahead. The first place that to me felt like we were doing something kind of different, and ironically enough, it was great until it wasn't, but
Hmm.
there's this place in St. Louis called Cinder House. Um, it's basically the one on one of the top floors of the Four Seasons, and the restaurant was inspired by the chef, and he basically, so it was a Gerard Craft restaurant,
Okay.
Gerard Craft chef in St. Louis, multiple awards, has won a James Beard, has won a lot of awards within food. And the Four Seasons at the time, they were starting to like, they wanted a lot of chefs with a lot of like acclaim. So they started to hire people who basically like they wanted to hire people with awards to their names as a way to help sell their restaurants.
Uh-huh. Got you.
So
The titles.
yeah, so it was like he created an entire restaurant concept based off of his nanny that he had as a kid,
Oh,
who
interesting.
yeah, who was, I forget her name, but she was like Afro-Brazilian, and he created an entire restaurant based off his nanny and the
Got you.
food that she would cook for him as a kid. Which we can, as if we're honest, like we can feel a lot of different types of ways about that.
Well,
It's
it is what it is. You know,
yeah,
it's kind of American history, if you want to
no,
be honest.
truthfully, and
Yeah.
that's like part of it was like, okay, like at least they're doing something different, and at least they're in an environment where you are putting things like feijoada, it's like literally just like Afro-Brazilian, like rice, beans, different meats. Sometimes it has like, oranges in it. It's like home cook things
Yeah.
on a level like it, obviously it, as simple as some of those things were, like it's done with such a level of care and finesse, but it's like we're quintessentially doing like Afro-Brazilian home food
Yeah.
and selling it to people for like
Top dollar.
hundreds of dollars.
Yeah. Top dollar.
So I couldn't be mad at that. And when I first started working there, it was like all the food we were doing was amazing. It was some
Yeah.
of the best food to me that was coming out of St. Louis at the time. Um, so yeah, it was like, I don't know, like once you start to kind of get up there, you're just like, wow, like every place is kind of like they're doing the same thing, or
Okay.
they're doing similar styles of food or whichever it is.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And like to me, I just kept being like, well, like for as much diversity as there is within like kitchens, I'm like you have like a whole staff that's like primarily like Black, Hispanic, Latin, and all I'm seeing is like white people food like go out the door.
Yeah.
So I'm like, to me, it just didn't make sense. So I honestly just kept circling back to like places where I kind of just wanted to keep pushing myself and like pushing the level that I wanted to get to. But
Gotcha. And keep searching for like the
yeah,
roots of
roots
the food.
and things that like I felt connected to culturally.
Okay.
So yeah, I was stayed there for a bit. One of the people there just so happened to be like a secret chef.
What does that mean?
He was a chef, but he was working as a bartender because he and his wife were opening up a new spot.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Gotcha.
So it was like he knew he would make way more money as a bartender.
Gotcha. Which makes sense. Which makes
Yeah.
sense.
So he was like doing that, and yeah, he gave me his card, and I went to go and be the sous over at his spot, which
Is the
there.
sous chef the head chef? Or is it he's under somebody?
So it's under the head chef or the chef de cuisine,
Gotcha.
and then so I guess the order would be like your executive chef, chef de cuisine, your sous chef. Sometimes there's an executive sous if you're in like larger operations.
Yeah.
Then you sometimes there's like an AM and PM sous depending on if
The
you have,
restaurant?
yeah.
Okay.
Then you have your chef de partie who runs your line or runs stations, stuff like that. And then like you have your commis or your cooks, stuff like that.
So depending on what the restaurant can afford, they can
Yeah.
have an EA or PM. Okay.
Definitely. So yeah, then from there, like I went to be the sous over there at Little Fox. And they're doing, so they were basically a chef in his wife, who's also a chef.
Gotcha.
They went from working in like some really nice kitchens over in New York. They went into like private dining.
Yeah. So
And
Jacques, how did you get to California?
oh man, um, basically, when my wife was convincing me to like move out here,
Yeah.
I took like a few interviews with a few random places.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, at the time, like I was still working for honeysuckle projects over in Philly, like as a consultant.
Okay.
Um,
We just show them like how to. They ask you like, "Hey, what should we do with this food?" And you just consult them, or
Honestly, it was like I had left there and I was actually pretty bummed about it.
okay,
Just because they were like just starting to open their brick and mortar. When I was over there, we were only doing like pop-ups.
okay,
And we had like a little farm over in West Philly that we were growing food from and
oh
a
wow,
bunch of other things.
nice,
And Honeysuckle Projects is like Chef Omar, who's on like High on the Hog on Netflix, stuff like that. Yeah, he's basically, they opened up an Afrocentric grocery store
yeah,
and bodega in West Philly. They're basically really doing food from the culture and doing it at a super high level.
gotcha.
So I felt very connected to it, and I was super bummed when I left.
Because
And
your wife or your girl at the time really wanted to come to
yeah,
California.
yeah.
Oh man,
So yeah, when I got to California, I ended up consulting with them for a bit because they wanted to make cowpea coffee.
okay,
We were growing at the time on the farm. We had a bunch of cowpeas, and we didn't know what to do with them. Um, so Omar kind of was toying. He did like a pea coffee for like a residency
yeah,
over at Blue Hill, and like because I was consulting with them, it was just like, hey, so like we want to make this into like an actual like coffee, and you're the only person that we know who has
gotcha.
coffee experience.
So
And so it kind of came full circle with that. But yeah, I was like consulting with them, trying to basically build a recipe for them to replicate.
gotcha. Did it ever work out?
It did.
Okay,
It worked out really well. They are actually, I don't know how much I can or can't say,
it's
but
up to you, I guess. Yeah.
yeah.
It's, if you guys have NDA, I don't know.
Yeah. I know that they are in the process of basically working with a very prominent company on basically canning and making
Okay,
that like a cold brew
nice.
version of it, a canned cold brew version of it.
Well, I hope you get a percentage of that.
I hope we'll
Yeah.
see.
You know what I was thinking is like, okay, so you were really happy in that position.
Yeah.
So my question is, what was your, I guess she was your girlfriend at the time. What was her argument, a reasonable argument to pull you out of something that you loved to to come to a place you've never been before, not really interested in?
Yeah.
What was her argument that could pull you away from that so much?
Honestly, I don't even think it was like an argument.
I
I
mean, you're not
could,
like an argument, but like, you know,
yeah.
like here's my proposition type of thing.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of it for me is like, well, I've never, at least on my end, like I've never been afraid to like try something new
Okay.
and like move, especially like I've moved around a lot and especially for work. So for me, like cooking, I knew I could get a job
Of
somewhere.
course.
I
Of course.
wasn't too worried about it. And I'm just like, well, like, she's super close to her family, then like that's fine. And I'm like,
Okay.
that's super chill. Like as much as I love this, like if I want to like build a life with someone, then like there are some sacrifices you have to do.
For sure.
So for me, it was like, well, I'm perfectly fine doing that. So yeah, I had no problem doing it. As much as I loved honeysuckle and like what we were doing and the kind of food we were doing and just the environment that we were in, like I also knew that like it's not like I can't talk to him still.
Gotcha. It's
Or
not,
like I couldn't call him and like still have those conversations,
yeah.
still like be a part of it. And anytime we go home, like I stop by there and it's like being with family.
It's like catching back up.
Yeah.
So like the relationship died.
Yeah, the relationship has never
Okay.
died. So to me,
Okay.
it wasn't something that like I was scared of, and especially when I took the job over at the Overland, like I called him like first thing was like, I need advice. This is like new, like all these things. So
Gotcha. Well, shout out to you for you know, leaving something that you love to support your wife, your current wife, you know, for
yeah.
her thing. You know, what would you say the difference is between someone who's considered a good cook and a chef?
Um, discipline.
Discipline?
I would say discipline. There's a
Okay.
lot of I've met a lot of really good cooks who just aren't disciplined
Gotcha.
enough to like do not even do basic stuff. Like to me, the difference of a chef is understanding like the dynamics in a kitchen and like leading a team.
Okay.
Like ultimately your job or like my job is to inspire my team, lead our team, keep creative and to keep coming up with dishes, to keep doing certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also at the end of the day, like it's still a business. So like you have to run it efficiently. So like food costs, knowing your vendors, knowing where you're getting stuff from, sourcing well, all these things.
Gotcha.
But I know a ton of great cooks who like are great cooks, but they're just not disciplined and they don't take criticism well. They don't take a bunch of these other little things well, that things that you need to like grow. And sometimes like as a cook, like as much as I want to be like, yeah, like you want to cook food that like we want to make and all these things, but I'm like at the end of the day, like there's someone out there who's paying for it.
Period.
So like as much as like I love places that will cook things and it's built off of like the narrative by the chef and like the team and all that stuff. And that's how they show hospitality. And that's great. That's amazing. But also sometimes like obviously like the IE is a little bit different, like food wise.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, like it's a little bit harder to get someone to spend like more than what they're comfortable and think that they're going to come multiple times a week
Gotcha. Because of financial.
because of financial reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or I'm like, there's a lot of things within like, especially having just even getting used to California where I was like, well, like sourcing was like a big thing for me, like figuring out, okay, like we have a bunch of local farms, all these things, which is great. But I'm also like, if I want, as someone who like is trying to do like more like Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latin food,
Yeah.
like with like nods to Africa and stuff like that, like a lot of that is sometimes fish. So where am I sourcing fish from?
Mm-hmm.
Where am I going to get it from? Who has what I need? And can they get it to me at a price point that feels right?
Yeah.
That can justify A, it being on the menu, and then B, like it being purchased multiple times.
Gotcha.
So to me, it was like, even if you make something delicious, if you can't like replicate it, and if you can't make a system or a recipe for it that can make it easily replicated for your team to do, then it can't be on the menu.
Period.
It can't. Because
Yeah.
if you're the only one who can cook it or has the skill set to do it, then it as good as the dish might be, like theoretically, if no one else can do it
Yeah.
on top of labor and all these other things, like then yeah,
It's useless.
That's useless.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are tons of things that like even the things that we make there, I'm like, there are tons of dishes that I'm like, yeah, we'll fucking never see the light of day because
Interesting.
it's like, well, like I love this, everyone tasted it and loved it, but like, can this be done multiple times
Can-
without error?
Can it be replicated?
Yeah.
And currently the head chef at Overlands, right? What did your typical day look like, if you can make it as brief as possible? And also, you get to choose the menu, right? How the menu comes out. And what's the term again for head chef?
So for me, I'm just the chef de cuisine.
Chef de cuisine. Okay.
So yeah, like a typical day is like on a day where we had like, if it's like in the middle of the week or something like that, generally like I'm coming in anywhere between like 8 and 10. Um, Sometimes I have a prep person there
Hmm.
working on stuff already. Generally, I come in, I'm doing all big projects for the day, whether that's like meat that needs to get broken down, fish, any of that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Um,
Do you know how to? So, like, say, like we went to the forest and we like killed a deer. Would you know how to break it down?
Not necessarily I could do it, but it would have to be like a basic, like
Okay.
having broken down like cows and pigs and stuff.
Hmm.
So it's like I can do basic butchering, but I wouldn't be able to like tell you the exact like parts of like what this deer is and then be like, well, you can use this for this
Okay.
and whatever it is. It would be super basic.
Got you. No, but we'll be good.
You would still be good.
Okay.
You'd
Okay.
have stuff to eat for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a lot of it is just taking on bigger projects or things that are more time consuming.
Hmm.
And then in between there, it's like any orders and stuff like that that need to get that come in. You know, we get them in, put them away properly, store everything, double check basically everyone's mise en place
Okay.
as far as like quality, things like that. Um, yeah, a lot of it is just kind of like doing all the little things, a lot
Okay.
of paperwork,
Okay.
random things
Interesting.
like that,
Gotcha.
invoices, dealing with all that stuff. Um,
What would you say is your specialty?
um,
Just personally, it doesn't have to be in the restaurant in general. Just
um, Honestly, I think a lot of it is just being creative, but
okay.
not being. I think my specialty is creativity, as far as being able to conceptualize dishes.
Mhm.
Um, like I don't know. I'd like to think that creatively, like I'm good, but I'm also someone who is like the end part of the process to me is boring. Like
Was that plating?
well, not even plating, but like the finalized dish to me is boring. I really like the process of like having an idea, like drawing out something what I want it to look like, and then the process of actually building that dish from start to finish.
Can you give us an example?
So one of the dishes that will probably never see the light of day, but I worked on for a while was this crab custard.
Okay.
So it was basically burnt leeks and crab custard. The leeks, we have like a yakitori grill set up in our kitchen, and it was basically leeks that we like washed, cut, and we just grilled very gently over the grill. Um, Basically, I had a bunch of lump crab meat that we were getting in, and I made a crab custard out of it. Um, and more or less, like the first iteration of that dish, comparatively to the one that I was like, this is done, like this is good, was like night and day. But it's like a lot of it to me is just like pushing yourself to be like, okay, so like let's try this. If we don't like it, what don't we like about it? What's
Hmm.
missing from it? Doing all the little things, being like, okay, so like I think this needs texture. Then I added like brown buttered pine nuts into it.
Okay.
I
Crunch.
crunch. Now I think this needs this, or this. Like, or this might need a little bit acid in this. Like, let's figure out what we want to put for that. And just to me, little things with like building a dish, and then like once you have that feeling like it's done,
Okay.
then it's done. But it's kind of like painting, where like you can paint for forever and you can paint over your painting,
Yeah.
and then you hit that wall of being like, well, is this done or is this not done?
Yeah. Am I ever satisfied?
If you're satisfied. And to me, I think a lot of it to me is, I think a lot of my, I guess, forte is being able to come up with things conceptually while also, like, you know, it not being a finished product and can very easily like work towards, you know, actually making it a composed dish.
Why do you think that the crab custard would never make the light of day?
Um, I just think it's too prep heavy for our staff to do on a consistent
Gotcha.
basis.
Your current staff.
Yeah.
Okay.
To me, that's definitely more of a coming from kitchens where we also just like we're more like fine dining.
Okay.
I just think for this area, I think that that's something where like I would rather do that at like a pop up.
Oh, interesting.
I wouldn't do that for like a regular menu
Okay.
item just because to me, I think that that's I don't know. Like I think um, I don't know. I think if someone is willing to like spend money to go out, um, I want it. I don't know. I don't want to be able to give them the same things every time. I want
Okay.
to like change it up as much as possible,
Gotcha.
depending on what we get in and like the seasons and all these things. Which obviously in California is a little bit different seasonally.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of it is just like I just like putting things on the menu that like are relatable. Um,
Can you give an example what you mean about that?
so to me, like we have a jerk chicken on the menu.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that.
I worked on that jerk chicken for like a year.
Yeah.
I tasted a lot of jerk chicken.
I was surprised when I saw it. I was like, jerk chicken. Okay. Yeah. Black man did that for
Oh
sure.
yeah. Yeah, no, I ate jerk chicken for a really long time before I ate a lot of it.
Okay.
But yeah, it was like to me, it was like the places that I really loved always had like and like chicken as like when we first opened that menu, like I didn't want to. Like growing up the way we did, like we never really had like red meat like that. Like it was
Yeah.
special occasions.
Mm-hmm.
It was special occasions, or like if my grandma was making something,
Mm-hmm.
and very rarely like we like what was it I forget what they call it, or back growing up it was like we only had like seafood on like Fridays
Gotcha. Gotcha.
and stuff like that where it was like
Ash Wednesday type of thing.
yeah for
Okay.
my grandma's house, so it was like things like that. So it's like we never, unless it was like at my grandma Irma's, like we never had like pork. Like we had a lot of pork, obviously, but like we never had things like steak. I didn't have my first steak until I was like 16.
Okay.
I never had my first burger until I was like 13.
Yeah.
Um,
I didn't have my mom used to make steaks well done.
yeah,
So I didn't have a steak medium rare, which I considered a real steak,
Yeah.
until like 21,
no,
20,
no,
19.
but that's what it is. It's like I never grew up having those things, and then like I remember like having my first oyster. Like we had
Yeah.
oysters on the menu when we first opened, and it was like I never had my first oyster till I started working in a fancy place that had them. So to me, it like there are just things that like to me I wanted to make it relatable, and like I put my grandma, she always makes these fry bakes that are
Okay.
like very like bastardized like fried bread,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like typically in a higher end restaurant, whatever it is, they always have sourdough. They always have this, and this.
Yep.
So to me, it was like, okay, so like, how do I want to make this approachable as far as being like, well, if this were like a white place or whatever it is, they usually have this, and this. So, what are the most like what is the ethnic version of like what this would be for someone?
Gotcha.
And let's try to at least be a starting point to open that conversation of like, so what, like, why isn't this on the same level as this? And why isn't it treated with the same level of respect?
Okay.
Because it's really the same thing. You just enjoyed bread. This bread is just fried.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between like this butter and this butter?
Gotcha.
Like,
Connecting the two.
yeah.
I like that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but do you advocate for kids of color to pursue cooking careers and stuff like that, or educating them on that? What's your
Um,
relations with that with kids of color?
Honestly, I will always advocate for kids of color doing things that they naturally love and are drawn to. Cooking is one of those things where like it is a lot of work and there's a lot of other things that someone could do with their time.
Okay.
I will never not like advocate for them to try something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it takes a certain kind of person to want to be in a kitchen all the time.
Gotcha.
Um, Honestly, it also doesn't help that like as someone who has like OCD, like for me, it's something that like I have very like thinking about dishes and about food and all that stuff is just something like because I have OCD, it also just heightens it a lot more.
Mm,
And my wife can, I'm sure, attest to how annoying that is for her. But it's just, I think that there are a lot of things that we were taught as kids as far as like what we should strive to be.
yeah.
Um,
Actor, rapper.
or not even actor, rapper, it's like, or sports or whatever it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is, or like, oh, like go be a doctor. Oh, do this and this. But I'm also like, I remember like I had a really strong interest in animals. I like growing up, like I really liked instances where like we got to be on farms.
Cool.
But I wish that someone would have told me, "Oh, like you like farming or like whatever it is. Like why don't you get into that?" Like
Mm-hmm.
no one told me that.
Gotcha.
No one said anything like that because it was looked at as a step backwards. But
Gotcha.
I'm like theoretically black farming in this country is like less than 1%. So I'm like what we do need are actually people like that who want to do that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
There's a lot of government subsidies
There's
and
yeah,
yeah.
and even then I'm like there are I don't know. It's just I definitely want to advocate for more diversity and inclusion within like kitchens in the space, especially because it is very like white male dominated.
Okay.
Um it just depends on like what you are into.
Gotcha.
And if you like I said, there's so many ways to be in like the industry without having to like endure someone being rude to you or like certain things or being in a place that you clearly like aren't being seen
Gotcha.
or on, so to me it's like I'll always advocate for people to try it, but like try it first.
Okay.
See if you like it.
Mm-hmm.
See if you like can devote yourself to basically a craft because
Yeah.
that's really what it is at the end
Yeah.
of the
Yeah. It's
day.
a craft, a skill, a
It's
trade.
a trade.
Yeah.
So to me it's like I definitely would have people like I've always been a fan of like staging and like going and seeing how something might be instead of like just jumping in
Right in.
and
Yeah.
it not being a good fit.
Gotcha.
And sometimes it's also okay to like love cooking and then have that like stage and then be like, honestly, I don't want to do this professionally.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Like keep your love for it because and that's also something that like I've come to terms with is that like it's also okay to love something and not love it all the time or not
Okay.
love certain aspects of it because
Yeah.
yeah, it's like anything else.
Yeah.
Like it there are times where it's okay to like genuinely just be like, yeah, like this fucking part of it sucks.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
that's also okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing's perfect.
No, nothing's
Yeah.
perfect and I think especially like within like the industry and like food and stuff, like there's a lot of like shitty things that happen.
Period.
And to me, it's like, especially now, like I said, like 20 years ago when people were like Gordon Ramsaying everyone and like throwing fucking
Hilarious.
plates and like
That's a real
doing all
thing?
the,
Is that a real thing?
yeah, they were
Wow.
like throwing plates at people. One of my first kitchen experiences, it wasn't thrown at me, luckily. I was just in the vicinity of where it was thrown. and someone threw a fucking plate. And it was the chef because something wasn't made the way he wanted the cook to make it, and he fucking threw a plate. And I'm like, thankfully, we're not in that fucking era anymore where
Wow.
it's like cool to be a dick for no fucking reason. So it's like, as much as I love, like, or I guess I have a love-hate relationship with like shows like The Bear because I fucking
Okay.
hate it.
I was gonna get into that. I was
Yeah.
gonna ask you about the bear. Like, sorry, you want to finish your thought before
Yeah.
I cut you
Oh,
off?
no, go for it.
I've heard from chefs that it's pretty accurate on a chef's life. Is this true or?
There are certain parts of it that are accurate. There's a lot of it that is kind of like dramatized.
Okay. Can you give
Like,
us examples? Yeah, of the two.
so there's like, I think it's like the first season where he like comes home after like a shift or whatever it is, and then he like sits on the TV. He's like watching, like he popped like a soda. He has like chips. He has something in the oven that he put in the oven, and he starts to fall asleep. And he like only wakes up because he realizes that whatever is in the oven is burning. Stuff like that. I'm like, yes, 1,000%.
Accurate.
Very accurate. There is definitely a point where when I was working at a place in St. Louis, like the commute there, like as someone who also wasn't driving at that time, like I was like walking 5 miles a day to get back and forth. Where it was like I was walking 2.5 miles to get to the metro like subway to go all the way downtown, would work like a 12-hour shift and would basically leave there by like midnight, 12:30 sometimes, and get back on the metro and do another 2.5 miles just to get to my apartment. So by the time I got home, it was like 1:30 ish generally every night. And I did that like for a year and a half. And there are plenty of times where I like would put it was a terrible lifestyle to be living. Thankfully I was living by myself. Where it was like I had a stack of like frozen pizzas, and I would just come in, I'd sit on the couch and like put something in, and I would fall asleep instantly. And I would only wake up because the smell
Of burning.
of something burning. So I realized that one, I was wasting money on frozen pizzas and I couldn't be doing that. So I changed it up where I was like only eating like Honey Nut Cheerios.
Gotcha. I was gonna say Hot Pockets.
Yeah, like something simple where
Yeah.
I'm like Cheerios, bash a bowl of Cheerios,
Yeah.
maybe 2 bowls of Cheerios, go straight to bed. So things like that where I'm like very relatable. I think the intensity is definitely something that's relatable.
Okay.
Just because like no one works this hard or works that hard to be mediocre.
Okay. I like that.
So to me,
Say that again. Say that again so I can hear you.
like no one works that hard to be mediocre. And to me, it's like especially when you're opening something, like that is your full self. And there are very like small, short moments where people get to authentically put themselves out there through a product or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There are very few moments like that. So when you do it and you're doing it at a high level, like that intensity warrants like all of that. Like
True.
sometimes where it's just like no one is going to care about it more than you do.
Period.
And you have to care. And that's like my biggest thing is like you just have to care, and you have to care more than the next person, because that's the easiest way that like there are plenty of people who like are very talented cooks and all these things, but like sometimes you don't have to be the most talented cook, but you have to care the most.
Okay.
And you have to care more than the next person, and you have to work harder than the next
I was gonna
person.
say put that work in.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to. So to me, it was always the case where it was like, yeah, like especially when I first started, like out of the gate, like yeah, like I wasn't the most talented coming from all these other places where like these people went to like culinary school, they went all these things, but I'm like, I took so much more pride in working harder than them. When the night was over for them, like I was still up or I was staying later to like work on stuff because I wanted to. But because I knew that like that was my only edge to like like surpassing them.
Yeah.
Was like I was never gonna learn all the things that they learned in culinary school in like whatever time I was there at the restaurant, but I know that I will outwork them,
Yeah.
and that's the only way,
And figure it out.
and figure it out.
Yeah. What would you say some of the things that were over dramatized in the show, The Bear?
Um,
If you could think of any.
I mean, there are certain little things like they're definitely, like me. There are like parts of season one where like I forget the character's name, but it was
What
like,
does he look like?
or there was like the smaller lady. I forget her name. She ends up being like the Sue in the second season or whatever
Okay.
it is.
Okay.
But Tina, right? She like turned on the pot, or someone put the pot down a stock. She like turned it up to like fuck with that stock or whatever it was. And I'm like, okay, like no one's doing that.
Yeah.
Like no one's intentionally being a dick like that to someone like for no reason. Or like them putting obviously like there's like that one episode where I forget the character's name, but she goes to get like a 22 quart worth of fucking veal stock that's
Okay.
just on the top shelf, which I'm like, no one would do.
Like why?
No one would ever do that.
Like logically.
Logically, that doesn't make sense, and that walk-in looks empty. So I'm like, there's plenty of room for you to put that anywhere else in there.
Yeah.
But then there are also like I think there was a weird parallel. Like I remember watching season two and being like, oh, like this is actually kind of cool. Like when when Marcus got to go to Copenhagen, I thought was like super sick. But it also felt very parallel for me because I had just gotten to go.
Okay.
So
To Copenhagen?
yeah,
Nice.
so it was like when I saw that episode, I was like, honestly, that was me my entire time there. It was just like fucking eating at all these places that I had only read about, had
Yeah.
never gotten a chance, like would normally never gotten a chance to go to. But yeah, it was just like getting to be at those places and getting to see like a whole different level of cooking.
Gotcha. Is Copenhagen like a big food spot or
It
something?
is massive for food. It
Really?
is, I would,
What country is that?
Denmark.
Denmark. Wow.
Yeah, I would go as far to say that it's like the Mecca.
Of food culture.
I think so.
Of like high cuisine.
Yeah. Where
Wow.
it's like, well, consistently, they've always had, I want to say 10-ish restaurants that have consistently always been in the world's best, like for the last decade, if not more.
Wow.
So yeah, they've just, oh, it's always been a giant food city. Obviously, it's a lot more polarized because of like places like Noma being there and like all these things.
What's Noma?
So Noma is basically one of the world's best restaurants.
Okay.
Consistently, it's been in the world's best restaurants. I think they've won the world's best like maybe 5 times
Okay.
in the last like decade. But it's consistently been in the world's like 50 best restaurants for like the last, I'd say 20 years.
Gotcha. And I'm assuming there's a lot of Michelin stars there.
Yeah,
Okay.
plenty of stars. But yeah, it's like there's so many places like that there.
Okay.
So many places that like even if they're not like Noma, they still have like 1 to 2 Michelin stars and they're just like kind of like in an alley, down some stairs.
Wow.
And it's like, oh, this is here and this is fucking crazy.
Delicious.
Yeah, it's fucking delicious. So the whole time, I mean, when I was there, it was like I was at Mad Academy, so it's like we're doing school stuff first for like
Gotcha.
8 hours, and then like we're just going around with like my classmates and just being like, where the fuck are we gonna go eat?
Nice. Can you tell us all what Mad Academy is?
Yeah, so Mad Academy was started by the chef in Noma, Rene Renzepi, basically as like I guess like a school for people in hospitality for them to take like 2 courses, either in business or leadership or environmental sustainability.
Okay.
So basically, it's like they kind of want to help guide like the future of hospitality through their lens.
Cool.
So yeah, I got to go. I applied to MAD through. They're doing like an LA Scholar thing. I applied and got in. So I didn't have to, like I said, Mad is a great experience. It's also one of those things where I'm like, if you have the means for someone to sponsor you, it's a lot easier. Because I think like the translation as far as like the money to go
Yeah.
is like 7 grand, and it's like a week.
Okay.
It's a fucking week. So it's easier if like your restaurant sponsors you or whatever it is,
Gotcha.
if you want to apply to
And you had a
go.
sponsorship.
I got a scholarship,
Okay.
so I didn't have to be sponsored. They paid for everything.
Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like, to me, I thought that like through the school, like I learned so much. There was a lot of like really insightful things. I was in the environmental sustainability course, so it was perfect timing. It's just with climate change and like
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
the world is going
Oh
through, and
yeah.
especially within food, like that changes our food a lot. So to me, it's like it's it's a really relevant course, and to just spend that week learning so much and learning from a bunch of different people, seeing how other restaurants also run
Yeah.
that are basically running off of like byproducts, which is
Cool.
crazy. So it's
Super cool.
like,
In Copenhagen.
yeah, where
Wow.
it's like it's now shut down, or a different company now, but me and my classmates, I'm so glad I didn't cancel that dinner. One of my classmates invited me to go to a dinner at this spot called the Mass. Um, and the chef of it was Matt Orlando. He used to be I think he was the first CDC over at Noma after Renee,
What does
and
CDC stand for?
chef de cuisine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there we go. And yeah, so he opened up his own restaurant, but basically it like, I think it was like 13 courses we had, but
Wow.
all of them were like these dishes that were made from the byproducts of other things. So it's like we had one dish that was like this, and like it was basically all veg, and like I think they had like 2 fish dishes technically,
Okay.
but it was like basically just all stuff made from the scraps of different things within their like little farm, different byproducts and stuff like that that they're using, fermentation, like a bunch of other random things. At one point, we had like a small piece of fish from this one dish, but then the next dish was like ramen, where the broth was made from the fish, and then the bones were made into ramen,
Okay.
where it was
The
like,
ramen noodles?
yeah.
Wow.
So he turned the bones into fucking soba noodles. So it
Wow.
was like things like that where like we weren't, I don't know, it just made me realize that like one, like cooking is limitless in that way,
Yeah.
where you can, if you can like conceive of an idea and you're like able to push yourself, you can get to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just like made me realize that one, like all the things that we covet in America is like fucking, it's like vastly different. Where it's like it doesn't have to be like as much food on your plate for as little as possible, or it doesn't have to be like this giant piece of meat on here
Yeah.
for you to feel sustained and like satisfied.
It's an American concept.
It's like a weird Western way of thinking. So yeah, like the second I left there, I was like, I just remember coming back and I'm like, everything here is wrong. Everything here is wrong. And
Everybody's doing it
everything's doing
wrong.
it wrong. And also like, why are we spending heaps of money on like meat like this? Or so I don't know. I can't remember exactly what the menu was for the Overland. I had had it like semi done, I think like 3/4 of the way done. And then I had that trip. I came back and I squashed all of
I
it.
was gonna say probably.
I
Yeah.
was like, fuck all that. That
Gotcha.
is, we're throwing all this in the garbage. We're gonna think of all new ideas. So yeah, to me it was just like, especially seeing in the bear like how hyped Marcus was, and like just him like being a little scared and timid at first, but then like kind of coming to his own towards
Yeah.
the end of the episode, and then him coming back with like newfound confidence in his abilities and like understanding. And to me, that's also just like when you get to stage at better places or places that like are doing things that you believe in and like you want to incorporate into your own program or
Yeah.
whatever it is, it's like you see that they do it with such a level of like dedication
Yep.
that to me is like also just something that we're like clearly missing in America. Is like
Mm.
that dedication to the idea of like not just it making money, but it feeling good for like the staff, it feeling good for like the environment, it feeling good for all of the above.
Gotcha.
And I think that that's been like my biggest thing is like especially watching that episode and like then him coming back and like that whole thing, like I thought that that was sick,
And relatable.
and very relatable.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was, I don't know, it was just super interesting because that to me was like I didn't think that I would like relate to it all that heavily. Like, yeah, there's definitely gonna be like some screaming bits, and I'd be like,
Yeah.
yeah, of course.
Got it.
We
Yeah.
all have. I'm like, there's definitely a handful of times where like, or that one episode where Sydney kept going into the walk-in just to like catch her breath
Yeah.
and like, fuck, and then come back out and like do her checks and all these things, and I'm
Gotcha.
like, every cook has always done that. I'm
You
like,
need-
I do that still to this day where I'm like, let me just go in here for like a second, breathe. All right, fuck it. Like,
Got you.
let's go
I need my
on.
happy place.
Yeah, just like real quick, like get in there. It's cold. Calm the fuck down for a second.
Yes.
And, you come out, finish your shift.
Good to go. I want to talk about sustainability, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
No, go for it.
So, talking about sustainability. So I'm certain, or I'm going to assume that you've heard about the Bill Gates and this insect that he's trying to.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
I don't I don't know. It's kind of I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Okay.
Like I think from that standpoint, like everyone should be down to try anything that clear like where we're at isn't working, right?
Okay. As far as like our food system and stuff like that?
Food system for sure.
Okay.
So like between that and like oil and like all these things, like there's so many different factors in it, like people's carbon emissions and like all these other things. Like
Yeah.
clearly where we're at, it's just not working. So yeah, I mean like everyone should be down to try something, but I think that that's a little bit like
It's a little too far?
I think that's a little bit of a reach.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I don't know. I think that there's also like greenwashing that fucking happens.
Can you explain what that is?
So greenwashing with like in regards to how people talk about like sustainability and how they can kind of get people to buy into it. And I've noticed that over like the last like, you know, handful of years
Mm-hmm.
is that like obviously like I don't know if like you're like me too where like sometimes you get like Instagram sponsor ads or sponsored ads and all these stuff and it talks about like eco-friendly this or like you should buy this because this is like eco-friendly, this is sustainable. It has all the buzzwords
Okay.
in it and fucking people will buy it.
Well, yeah.
People will buy it instantly. So I think that there's a lot of that where like, but people don't really check to see like what they're actually doing
Gotcha.
and double checking to make sure that that's actually a worthwhile like purchase.
Like
and
researching.
actually researching it.
Gotcha.
And to me, I think that that's a whole other fucking side to it.
Yes.
Is that like and like believe me, there's tons of things that I bought where I'm like, I heard this was sustainably made, and then it turns out it's not.
Gotcha.
And then I'm like, well, they just fucking hoodwinked me out of $50.
Yeah.
But like, I think especially when it comes to the food system, like, I don't think that it's necessarily like super, super complex. I just think that like, if we obviously like just change our like eating habits more than anything else, I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's pretty like I think it's a good start.
Gotcha.
Like I don't think it has to be like we're also talking about like before we can even talk about like sustainability within food, like economics is clearly like a big player in that.
Yes.
And to me,
Yes.
that's the thing that never gets addressed when people start talking about like when people start talking about economics within like food and like all these things or like sustainability within food, they never bring up the point of like economics being like a big player in that.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, well, yeah, like if coming from Northwest Philly, like if I'm leaving my mom's house and I go down the street, there's like a really like low. I forget. I think it's like a Save a Lot. It's like a Save a Lot. There's a KFC, and then there. It used to be a Chick-fil-A, but
Okay.
now it or not a Chick-fil-A. What is it? Checkers.
Okay.
It used to be a Checkers, but now it's something else. And and it's like a little plaza, but it's like we're like theoretically this is a food desert, so like what incentive are you giving people to actually change their eating habits, because
Yeah.
you're really not.
Well, you're not building anything around it.
You're not building anything around it.
Yeah.
These kids don't know anything different. Like
Yeah.
I can count on my hands the amount of time where I'm like we had a bodega at the end of the block growing up, and I'm like I can definitely count on my hands the amount of time I've ever seen like more than just like random onions. They definitely didn't have fruit in there. Like there was just like random things in there that I'm like, yeah, like this is dope, and I'm glad that I can like get a sausage, egg, and cheese for fucking $5. But I'm also like, am I thinking about where this stuff came from?
Just want to
No,
eat.
I just want to eat.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like I think especially when if we want to like effectively start having those harder conversations on like food injustice and like all those and sustainability, then like we have to start talking about the economics of it
Yeah.
and like what that actually looks like.
And I guess that's where community gardens is a really good thing too.
It's
Yeah.
massively important.
You
Yeah.
know. Wow. So interesting. Yeah. I think the insect thing with Bill Gates is very interesting. And we talked a little bit about American food,
Yeah.
right? And basically it being Black American food or Afro infused food. But I guess my bigger question is this: we have Mexican food, we have Asian food, we have Italian food, we have French food. But is there really like Black American food besides AKA soul food that's actually like we actually created? Is that, you think there's an actual thing like that, or can it be? Can we create something like that? Can Black
Yeah.
Americans create something like that?
No, I think there can be. I think a lot of it is like there's so many like dishes I'm sure that like everyone's grandma made that like really you could technically hold that up as like a badge, so to
Hmm.
speak. But yeah, I mean, I think it honestly is truly more so for younger cooks too. I
Hmm.
mean, I think especially as I get older and now like even the like trademark of soul food feels like antiquated in a weird way just because of I think there's so many more younger cooks now of color, of black cooks
Hmm.
who instantly draw towards their heritage. And to me that's amazing
Yeah.
because that means that like not everyone's version of soul food will look the same as it did for us, growing up.
Yeah.
Like maybe theirs actually looks way more authentic and like not just like a bastardized version of it.
Yeah.
Or like my I don't know, it's like I always think of like Philly like West Philly barbecues, and it was always like you had like the everyone would have their little like silver tray, and it was like mac and cheese, collard
Yeah.
greens, like the
Cornbread.
cornbread, potato salad, like blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, what if their version of that is just like vastly different like 10 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
because they like did a deep dive on like their culture, and like they wanted to make other stuff.
Yeah.
So
Okra.
yeah. And even then, like, I love okra, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, if I would personally like, I pickle it, and I like to add that to things at home.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like, even then I'm like, what if like the new version of that are like actually using different spices? Like, I know for us, like, we use a lot of like different spices that we get from Africa and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So to me, it's like, I kind of love that maybe that perception of what that is going to change, and it'll keep evolving and changing,
Mm-hmm.
because they're just getting more and more in touch with their roots, and they're doing deep dives into their own culture, and like actually being like, so hey, like, I know I've only had it this way growing up, but like I actually found a book, and it like a really old cookbook or something like that, and it taught me how to do this, and I like actually want to do it this way because this way looks and sounds delicious.
Okay.
So I'm like, that's sick. I think that there's so many like, I think we're definitely entering like a new wave where, like, to me that's just more the norm. It's like,
Okay.
especially like whenever I go home, I'm
True.
like, I see more like younger kids who are doing pop-ups, but they're doing pop-ups and it's like all Caribbean food. It's like all this, and that, or it's like very regionally specific,
Yep.
where it's like
Yeah.
they're doing like, oh, like we're only doing, Moroccan food.
Yeah.
We're only doing Nigerian food. We're
Yep.
only doing this, and this. And I'm like, that's sick. That's amazing. Because to me, I'm just like, that just opens up the door for like people to have different flavors and things, but it's like still very similar.
Yeah. And everyone gets to try something different and
Exactly.
new. Jacque, what is the most complicated thing or difficult thing you've ever made?
Um, Honestly, baking is like my biggest.
Okay.
It's
It's your
like,
kryptonite.
it's not my kryptonite. I like am. I don't. I would say baking is like my, like, I'm not. I wouldn't call myself a baker. I would say that I'm probably a little bit like, as someone who is not a giant like pastry person,
Okay.
but baking seems to be the thing that like I'm absolutely frustrated by sometimes.
Gotcha. So you look at them as two different things between baking and actually like like a chef and a baker are two different things.
To me, yeah.
Okay.
Where it's like, not every chef has like pastry or like baking in their background.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like one of the things, especially during the pandemic when everything shut down, what I realized was that like the only handful of places that were open were all like pizza spots, and they were all bakeries.
Oh, interesting.
So to me, it was like, oh, like I just went to go and work at like a bakery during the pandemic, or like I would work over there like for free, for like
Just do
just to
it.
do it,
Okay.
because I'm just like, this is something that like I don't have a lot of skill in. And to me, it's like, well, how else am I gonna fucking learn? And of course, like everyone during that time was learning on the internet how to make bread.
Of course.
So I was just like, well, I don't want to do that. I'm like, they might know what they're doing, they might not. I don't
Yeah.
really know. Or everyone was like trading starters for money and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So I'm
True.
like, I don't want to do that either. Or like, I don't want to figure it out that way. I
Yeah.
just want to learn from someone who knows what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, baking is definitely one of the things that like, it's super frustrating. They're definitely like, there are highs and lows with baking for sure.
Got you. I got
And
you.
it's because like it's so specific. There's
Very, very.
very little, such little room for like adapting
Mm-hmm.
and like changing things, or if the environment isn't right, you know, if it's hotter than what it needs to be, if the temperature just in the room is colder than what it needs to be, or whatever it is. There's all these other little things that are frustrating,
Got you.
as someone who is just like, I need to make this to make this delicious,
That part.
and like I need to get this done. And also it's like, I don't know, bake, like, if I don't know, it's like cooking savory to me is like painting. It's like the
Okay.
only thing that I can compare it to where
Okay.
there's like a lot of room to adapt. There's all these things. And then like baking to me is like um I don't know, it reminds me it's definitely more so like it reminds me of like furniture in that way where like you have to be a bit more intentional. You have to like really slow down and like you can't cut corners on it.
Gotcha.
You have to like really pay attention to it or else like you're going to have a result that you're not okay with.
Gotcha.
So to me it's like sometimes like when I see cooks working and stuff like that, it can feel like very painting like where like it's very organic, it's very natural. And then baking is the one thing that like you have to slow down.
Gotcha.
You have to like really make sure that this was the exact measurement you needed it. This is exactly the way you need it, and that's it.
Yeah.
So it can be frustrating for sure.
It
As
it seems like, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
no, go for it.
It seems like baking is like dealing with someone who's high maintenance,
Oh, 1,000%.
and cooking's like and other cooking is just like a free spirit. Like, hey,
Oh no, it's
we can do whatever we want
no,
today.
we can do whatever we want, and then like the high maintenance person's like, no, we actually can't. We
No.
have stuff to do and all these things, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's a vastly different like realm to get into. It's always worth it because I just think that, especially now, like everyone should know generally, like in a kitchen, like how to work like some sort of bread
Okay.
even if it's
Okay.
not like a sourdough or whatever it is, but people should know how to make basic bread.
Gotcha. Basic bread.
I think that that's like a very easy thing.
I like that. It's like a fundamental type of thing.
Yeah, like our grandmothers did. Like
Yeah.
everyone knew how to make something, whether it was like biscuits, whether it was cornbread, all these things. They knew how to make something, whether or not like it's a giant loaf, like depends on your need.
Yeah.
But I'm like, they all knew something.
They did.
They knew how to work dough generally. So to me, I'm like, yeah, like that should just be like a basic thing that people know how to do.
Uh-huh. And obviously you do head chef work, but do you do private chef work or catering at all? Do you do stuff like that?
Um, Not necessarily. Honestly, I hate catering.
Okay.
It
The truth is out.
yeah, I hate catering. It's like I don't mind catering. It's just that like for the handful of times that I've gotten to experience it through like other things, um, it just is like I don't know. It's just interesting because you're like,
They're going to say a nightmare.
well, not even a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's just different
Okay.
because obviously, like, you're not cooking everything to order. Then
Mm,
you're like trying to time everything right. Like it's just a lot. Serving a lot of people to me just has never been like a thing that I love.
gotcha. Like
Of
200
like,
people type of thing.
no, absolutely
Gotcha.
not. I'm like, I don't like. It's a difference, obviously, when you're like working in a restaurant and you do like 300 covers that night.
Hmm.
But then obviously, like when you're at a new, like when you're catering, like it also depends on like if you have like the equipment to like hold things properly, like if you have the space to like prep things out for
Yeah.
like 200 people or whatever it is. So yeah, I don't know. Thankfully, I've only been asked like a few times,
Okay.
and
Don't ask them, folks.
yeah, do not ask me. I will absolutely. I'll think about it for like a day, and then I'll text you the next day and be like, no,
Gotcha. Give them the right price point.
maybe.
Yeah.
I would maybe consider it for the right price point. But private gigs, I've never thought about doing private.
Okay.
Yeah, honestly, like especially with now like kids or like younger cooks doing stuff on like TikTok or like YouTube or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Honestly, I just love like maybe it's just the parallel from having played a lot of sports growing up, but I honestly just love being a part of a team.
Gotcha.
I always loved like to me the energy when you're in a kitchen that's like really humming and everyone gets along and you're super busy and like all these things. There's nothing like that. And to me, that was always the thing that drew me to being a part of certain things and not necessarily being solo. was
I
always
got you.
just like I really loved being a part of the team. I really loved like the camaraderie that you build with your team, and like just like also overseeing the younger cooks and just like kind of watching them grow in their own craft and
Hmm.
like their new ideas, and seeing them like struggle, and then like that light bulb kind of just turn on for them, and then they're just progressing. So to me, I always really loved being a part of a team more than anything else.
I
Yeah,
love that. That's
yeah.
awesome. The vibe is completely different,
Oh, for sure.
you know?
It's like I'm sure like with catering and stuff like that, like it to me that's also just like 2 to 3 hours of it just being super fucking hectic. Um and I'm like it's one thing to do it when you're in service and you're in like your own kitchen and you're comfortable and all that stuff, and it's another thing to do it when you're in no you don't know.
Yeah. Are there any chefs today that you're impressed with or that inspire you?
Yeah, there's so many. One of obviously like big shout out to Omar, Omar Tate. Like he has always been someone that, having known him over the last handful of years now, like he's always someone who's like a mentor to me, but also just someone who like is super down to earth and like will tell you like it is, and he's just a really great chef. Um, but Paul Carmichael is probably my favorite chef. Um, He he was the chef over in Sydney, Australia. He ran Momofuku Seobo for I think 5 6 years. They were doing basically um, like Caribbean food in a place in Sydney where
Hmm.
like you would never get Caribbean food. Um, But yeah, he's someone who I always really liked and looked up to, especially when coming to start to like kind of formulate my own ideas
Yeah.
or style of cooking. Um, but yeah, there's so many different people that I look up to. I also had a lot of really good like women chefs that were some of my first chefs when I first started, and I look up to them, still talk to them like pretty regularly.
Okay.
Um, one of my really good friends, Hannah Chung, is like a phenomenal cook. They're over in St. Louis still. I think they're the Sioux over at a place called Indo. Um, but she's an amazing cook. Was a really great leader. Definitely someone who um, I always inspired to be like,
Nice.
as far as just how she was able to honestly just get the best regardless of anyone's talent or skill level. She was able to kind of just like rally them to get the best out of that person,
That's a
which
skill.
is hard.
Yeah, it's a skill.
It is immaculately hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was always she was always someone that I looked up to, and obviously she was a phenomenal cook, but to me it was like how she led the team, and
Hmm.
like how her leadership style and like all these things translated over, and like how people responded to it. Like that to me was like always my biggest thing with her too.
Dope. Yeah. I want to thank you, Jacques, for being here. Are there any current projects that you're working on?
Yeah, so outside of this move, I'm gonna start doing a little bit more pop-ups
Okay.
under what we'll call common interests. So it'll
Okay.
be um, more 4 to 6 course tasting menu. Mostly just like Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latin, and little kind of nuances of like African food.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I want to start doing more pop-ups, especially now that we're gonna be leaving. But yeah, I want to keep just showing people like a new style of like the shit that I grew up growing on. So
I love that. I love that. Jacques, let's say 100 years pass by, 250 years pass by. What would you like your empire to look like regarding food, family, lifestyle? what would you like your empire to look like?
Um, Honestly, I want I as much I don't know. I think so much of it. I want one place. I want one restaurant that stands the test of time more than anything else. Um, I want a farm because I want to be able to grow stuff for that concept,
Hmm.
but also just to like actually like live off the land. Actually sounds nice. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty simple. I
Okay.
just want I want to be near a body of water.
Okay.
I want to be able to like forage and be within nature, read more, chill, cook a lot. Um, yeah, I just want to enjoy it without the stress of like always having to like be doing something
Gotcha.
more than anything else. Yeah.
Gotcha. Jacques, I want to thank you so much for being on The Empire. Can you please tell everybody how they can find you, reach you, support you? He doesn't have any social media, by the way, folks, so I don't know. Unless he does, I don't know. But
Yeah.
can you please tell us all how we can find you and support you and do all these things, know what you're up to?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if not, you can always reach me through. Oddly enough, I get a lot of random people who will ask for like, oh, like, can you like hook me up with like a recipe for something like that, or make like, would you mind making like empanadas for me, or like random stuff like that. It's all through my wife's Instagram because
Okay.
she's a lot more on top of that kind of stuff than I am. Her following is at Jazz Brickhouse
Can
on
you spell that
Instagram.
for us?
Yeah, JAZZBRICKHOUSC.
Okay.
She's also a hairstylist, so if anyone needs their hair, tamed, all that good stuff.
Gotcha.
But yeah, generally it's through there, or I'm actually working with Dewan on more like stuff for common interests and Instagram and all that good stuff.
Yeah, we need to get you one, man. It's
I know, it's key.
yeah, it's like you're having money slip right through your hand. It's like
I
you're letting it
know.
burn.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, we're working on it for sure.
Gotcha. It's easy fix. You can.
Yeah.
Yeah, easy fix. So Jazz Brickhouse, guys, for now.
Yeah.
And if we we're gonna hopefully make him get an Instagram before that, and we'll put that in the description as well, his personal one.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that way, his wife can get her own business, and
Yeah.
he can deal with his own.
For sure.
But I wanna thank you again, Jacques,
sure.
for being on. Ladies and gentlemen, such a great episode again. We learned so much. We know what chef de cuisine is. Hopefully, or cuisine de chef is.
Yeah.
One of the two is, which is head chef. We learned a lot about how he came from Northwest Philly, and how bodegas wouldn't have no food there, and how his initial training came from building things as furniture, right? And super cool. So I'm pretty sure he could probably still build things if we gave him the tools. And then how basically he pursued cooking and chef through friends, but then he became more introspective about himself and his culture, and now he's pursuing about giving, basically Afro culture to the public in different creative styles. So we learned so much today, ladies and gentlemen. And again, I want to thank him. I want to thank all you guys for watching, listening. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you want to support, please do our Cash App, which is $THEE Empire Podcast. Also our PayPal, which is .me/TheEmpirePodcast. My name is Antonio the Miles. And other than that, we'll catch you guys in the next one. All right? Peace.
Peace.
I say it's my duty. Yeah. Is it my will? Yeah. To do what? Yeah. To do is right. I say.
1 second.